We'll keep this pretty informal. We'll start with some introductions, and then just feel free to come up with your questions. I think we have some bets going on within the committers as to how many people, whether the first question will be, when will Lucene 4.0 be out? But feel free to ask that one. Also, where's Otis and Eric? I see Otis back there, come on. And where's Hatcher? Not sure, all right. Well, they can bring up when they're ready. So with that, why don't we just start? Maybe we can take some of the mics off so that we can pass them backwards, but maybe just start with Steve here and have everybody introduce themselves. And I also want to make a special note. There's a new gentleman who just was elected to the committer panel, to the Lucene committers this morning. Mr. Eric Erickson. I know many of you probably have had your questions answered. I know many of you probably recognize Eric from the mailing list, so we're very happy and excited to have him on board with all of us. So with that, maybe Steve, you want to start, or just quickly introduce yourself, maybe where you work. And
my name's Steve Rowe. I work at Syracuse University at the Center for Natural Language Processing.
My name is Robert Muir. I work for Lucene Imagination.
My name is Uwe Schindler. I'm working for SD Data Solutions in Germany.
My name is Mark Miller, and I work for Lucid.
My name is Simon Wilnauer, and I work for J-Team.
I'm Ryan McKinley, and I work on a search solution for geographic data.
Hi, I'm Michael Bush, and I work for Twitter on real-time search.
Yannick Seeley, I work for Lucid Imagination.
I'm Otis Gospodnetic, I run Sematext.
I'm Eric Erickson, I work for Lucid Imagination.
Andrzej Białecki, I work with Lucid Imagination.
Eric Hatcher, Lucid Imagination.
Okay, so with that, if you can just use a microphone, or maybe do we have a wireless mic too? That might be useful for the people in the back row that we can pass around. I will tell you, by the way, while we're waiting for our first question, we are working towards 3.2 release right now. I think we've finally gotten the nut cracked on how to get more frequent evolutionary releases out, if not the 4.0 branch, which is a bit more revolutionary. So we seem to have good community energy around more frequent releases. I know we've promised that in the past, but I think we do have the systems in place now, the repeatable builds and stuff like that should make it that we can get more reliable, repeatable releases out on a more frequent basis. So, Anne, go ahead.
Okay. It seems that over the past 2 years or something, mobile and also offline has become much more important. So for instance, what we are doing is we're creating an HTML5 web app which involves search, also local search, and we'd like to use Lucene also in an offline mode for HTML5 applications. How is both mobile for Android and iPhone and HTML5 offline capability on your roadmap? Do you think about how we can use some of the capabilities of that if you're much more restricted?
Simon, you've been doing some mobile development, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been using Lucene on Android though, and maybe I didn't get the question right. What do you want to do, or is there anything Lucene cannot do today?
Well, the specific question, I was interested in to what extent using, let's say, a lot of the focus right now is on using Lucene and Solr in the cloud, in the services, and connect to it. However, there are use cases to bring it more local, where you have much more constraint, like using Lucene on Android, sure, that's one. But one specific for the HTML5, you use HTML5 offline, in offline mode, right, with a local data storage. We would like to offer people the ability to search their local storage with Lucene and not try to recreate something like that in JavaScript, just because Lucene cannot handle that. How should we do that?
Actually, like HTML5, I only know that you incremented the number, that's about it. So I'm probably not the right person to talk to.
Well, I mean, I think, for Lucene itself, I mean, obviously it fits well into all of those pieces. I mean, plenty of people use Lucene just for desktop search solutions. So, I mean, the offline mode definitely makes sense. And then, I mean, you run it fine on Android, right? I mean, so, and there is actually even isn't there a port of Lucene for like iPhone?
There were people working on that, porting Lucene to Objective-C, but I don't know what the progress is. But honestly, like with Lucene 4, it's going to be super hard to keep up for other ports with the index form and all that kind of things. But when you look at like Java solutions on Android, we usually try to be also efficient on very restricted systems, like the column stride fields I was talking about yesterday is something which you can certainly use on an Android if you cannot afford loading a field cache and you want to do stuff like with field cache. In general, Lucene gets more efficient memory-wise and CPU-wise anyway, so that you can also have the benefit from that on really small systems. The other question is if we consider Android to be Java or not, but there's been a discussion about that. Currently, it's working well. We don't have any dependencies in core which would make you to build your own Lucene jar. It was different in the past when we had remote and there were no RMI implementation on Android, so you had to build your own, but that's gone now. So you should be actually fine just dropping it in and build your application.
And in contrast to Solr trunk, even Lucene trunk keeps on Java 5, so it's Android compatible.
If you do a search for Lucene in the marketplace for Android, you'll see a bunch of applications, and the top one I see is something called Lucene API. So check it out. Do a search.
First off, I want to thank you guys for all the work you do. It is really tremendous. So I want to say, just keep it up. Like a lot of us in the room, we do depend on EC2 and cloud providers out there, and so I just kind of wanted to get your guys' sense on roadmap. What kind of cloud features do you see in the near future, and kind of where do you see cloud kind of fitting within Lucene, and specifically around things like multi-master, replicas, just general, handling variance and speed capabilities. Where do you guys see the feature set going? Thank you.
Well, we probably got a couple layers here. I think, there's the low-level I/O question around, the actual directory implementations, because usually, from what I've seen in virtual hardware, the I/O is one of the big issues, right? Like if you have an I/O-heavy application, then I/O becomes, in virtual hardware becomes even slower, right? But then, as far as the multi-master and the scaling and all that, maybe Yannick, you can talk about the Solr cloud stuff a bit.
Yeah, I mean, cloud is such an overloaded term too, but I think some of the very short-term plans for Solr, we have the Solr cloud thing, it really only addresses more of the search side currently, and I think we really need to tackle the indexing side. Currently, Solr has replication, but for a variety of reasons, I think that's not always optimal. One is the latency; it doesn't fit in well with near real-time search. If you go and update a master, then you have to wait for replication to happen before the slaves can see it. So that's not great. So I think we need to move to a model where you can send a document to a Solr server, and that Solr server will send it to n other Solr servers based on your replication factor and stuff like that. So that's where I think we should go very soon.
Anyone else want to add to that?
So basically, the Solr cloud stuff that we've done so far is really just kind of on the search side, and I think there's still a bunch to do there. But if you check out John Giffords from Loggly, he has a talk later today. They're using the Solr cloud stuff that we've done so far. So that'd be a great thing to go to kind of see where we are. And the next thing is to get indexing done, which is much harder problem. So it's on the roadmap, but I don't know how soon we're going to get to it. But
One more indicator that is important that we need to work on is Elasticsearch. They have a couple of really good ideas, and I think it's a really good indicator that it has to be in a roadmap, and we're going to move that way rather sooner than later, I think. The other thing is like changing an architecture like Solr to be more flexible in that respect is a lot of work, and I think we need more contributors and more people helping us. And I can only encourage like everybody. You know, I see a lot of patches coming up in Lucene and Solr, which people think they need to work on until it's perfect. We don't need perfection, right? So everybody who wants to contribute anything or can contribute anything, please go ahead. We need more people.
All of us as committers, it's something where we came in and we had a need, and you just start contributing, and it has made a lot of difference in what we do and what we get to work on. So just start contributing. Sometimes that's hard to get your employer to do it, but it is definitely possible. I've seen in many organizations that are adverse to open source at first, and then by working on them and showing them the benefit, you can get them to allow you to contribute as well. So it's definitely, everybody's welcome to join. It's open, it's free, it's just get on the mailing list and start asking questions. After a little while, you start answering questions, and then next thing you know, you're contributing patches. So,
I'm out there. What he didn't say is the next thing you know, you're a committer. No, and I do want to make a point here to back up what Grant said. I started in Lucene, getting onto the list, getting some very naive questions answered, very kindly, I might add. And at that point, I got into very identified self-interest of saying, okay, if I free up some of the simple questions I can answer, then these guys can answer the more complicated questions and help me out. Just get involved in that community. It's a fantastic list. I've seen instances, and I'm going to sing these guys praises since I wasn't part of it. I've seen problems identified or questions come up on the list, a problem identified, and a patch ready inside of 45 minutes. Try that on any commercial piece of software anywhere. I timed this about 3 weeks ago.
Thank you. One more thing. Contributing to Lucene doesn't mean to write code, right? So there's a lot of people, like there's one guy sitting in Belgium. He got a virtual server sitting somewhere running tests 24 hours, and he's helping so much. So if somebody has like a piece of spare hardware, you just want to download the Lucene code and run some tests, it's a tremendous help. Just create an issue, and we'll jump on it, fixing bugs. It helps you too, right? Or documentation. If somebody wants to help doing the website, I mean, it looks a little bit like 1980s, so somebody needs to do it sooner or later, right? So it's all contributions. It all helps, and it's definitely appreciated.
Yeah, if you have any ounce of graphical design skills, please.
The admin UI looks a lot better now.
Yeah, there is going to be a new Solr admin UI coming soon. So.
There he is.
Oh, did you commit it today?
Yeah.
All right, there you go.
Heavy committing.
Well, you didn't like that gray background and
The old one's still there for those who still love it. So.
Trying to challenge you guys, right?
Yeah.
So Elasticsearch has come up, has some really interesting ideas. It's not as mature as Solr yet, but some of the things, let's say Solr has grown into a big, sometimes hard to manage thing as any mature software piece. So when do you guys think Elasticsearch will replace Solr as the de facto thing to use Lucene with? You're trying to incorporate some of the things from Elasticsearch into Solr, but
I mean, I guess, well, other than it being that we don't own Elasticsearch. I mean, the person who's developing Elasticsearch hasn't contributed, but I mean, I think the important thing is it has an Apache license, and the ideas in there are free and open to use, and there's some good ideas in there, and we should take and learn from those and incorporate them into the modules and into Solr and where it makes sense. So. And if he wishes to contribute to Lucene and Solr, then by all means he's free to do that. I mean, we more than welcome contributors who have good ideas. So, as for is there going to be an Elasticsearch inside of Solr? I mean, I don't know what that means necessarily, but certainly the ideas and some of the the pieces behind it certainly would make sense to incorporate in where appropriate.
Hi. I guess I've just been really excited the last few days hearing about all the new cool stuff that's in Lucene Trunk that I want sooner. I'm not going to ask the question of when it's going to come out, but I really like the sort of Debian release model where there's the stable fixed release, then there's the bleeding edge crazy stuff, and there's also something in between that's maybe a little bit more stable. Have you guys considered, stable points within Trunk that might be ready for outside testing?
I mean, I guess I can kind of address that. I mean, I think many of us actually run off of Trunk from some nightly build on a pretty regular basis. So given the way we have our tests set up now and all that, I think most of us would agree that we keep things pretty stable on Trunk, and we tend not to commit unless we break things. Or, I mean, we tend not to, sorry. It's too early in the morning. We tend to make sure all tests pass and all of that stuff, and have pretty extensive regression suites. Of course, we're always trying to improve them, and I know these guys can talk more about it. But
so I guess on that note, who's the biggest index you know about that's running off Trunk?
The biggest I know of running off a Trunk, Twitter.
Yeah, Twitter is running about 1.5 billion queries per day off Lucene Trunk. Well, it's a trunk from, I think, 2 months ago or so.
And how many documents, roughly? Is that something you could share, or no?
No.
So, sorry. Well, I mean, I've seen, I think, publicly that there's roughly 100 million tweets a day. That's public information.
Yeah,
so you can do the math on that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting idea, though. A lot of times something just lands on Trunk that we kind of know, this needs some time to shake out. There's going to be some bugs that show up. So it's an interesting idea that maybe, at certain points we could say, all right now, actually, Trunk is looking pretty stable. We haven't just landed something big and crazy. Maybe now is a good point, and just kind of let users know this is a more stable point. We haven't really done that in the past, but it might be a good idea.
Yeah, and actually, I mean, part of doing a release is there's the ASF has legal requirements around, so that's why you always see these vote threads of, vote to release. And so sometimes there's just this inertia around actually doing the packaging for a release. But I think, as I indicated earlier, I think we've got our packaging a lot more automated at this point, and we're actually working on automated tests for the packaging as well. So that's another great place for people who want to contribute, is if you have areas there. The other last thing I would add is we are working on, and this goes to all the contributors, because I know a lot of people sometimes feel like you make contributions and we can't always keep up. As you see, there's only a certain number of us. So some of the things that we're also looking for help on and trying to get in place is automated testing around contributions. So when a patch comes in, we can automatically apply it to Trunk and have it run all the tests, and then automatically give feedback back to you as a contributor. So then we as committers, we know whether this patch is kind of past the baseline things that we need it to do. So then we can just evaluate it for, does it make sense in the context of where does it fit into Lucene or Solr?
Another issue I'd like to mention is the backwards compatibility. If you decide to run off the Trunk, you need to be prepared to spend additional resources to port your application and port your indexes to the new formats. Because the format is not guaranteed to be stable in the Trunk, and in fact isn't.
Yeah, we had quite a lot of times in the past changes that were not compatible. So you had to re-index or use an old 3.1. So if you have an index from 3.1, you can always read it with Trunk. But it may be the case that you yesterday built an index with Trunk and try to read it with the newest Trunk on the next day, and it does not work anymore, and you get strange exceptions or something like that.
So make sure you back up before you upgrade.
All right, thanks a lot.
To give you a notion, we changed the format for Lucene for Trunk, I think, 4 times in the last 6 months. So at least, yeah.
At least.
I feel bad for Twitter.
I did 4 changes.
Hi, I was just wondering, do you guys plan on sticking with Subversion for the near future, or are there plans to move to another version control system soon?
We just had a discussion driving here in the car about that, and we'd love to have something else like Git or Mercurial, but I think it's an Apache thing, right? So we need to have infrastructure, and changing the infrastructure from one version control system to another I don't think it's an easy task. And infrastructure at Apache, they all people doing it. A lot of people doing that in their free time, and contributors also on the infrastructure side. So I personally, I'm not sure. I don't know if there's anything going on, but I don't think it's gonna.
I think we have rewrite Git at Apache now. I'm not.
Well, they're running like a trial with a project or two,
Right.
and we're going to have the option. But honestly, for every version control system, there's a bunch of people that hate it. So I wouldn't be sure it's going to be so easy to move. I know a couple people hate Git. I know a couple people hate everything. So it's likely that the SVN will be the way for a while, in my opinion.
There is, we do have read-only mirrors on Git. So you can, I forget what the URL is, maybe just like git.apache.org. So I know like a lot of committers have their own checkout from Git of Lucene or of Solr or whatever, and then develop patches locally in Git, and then just there's tools to go between Git and SVN, so then they generate a patch at the end. So that you should feel free to use that if that makes it easier for you to develop.
Yeah,
So.
I am using that. It's quite.
Yeah, so like I know I have a fork up on GitHub of Lucene that I use sometimes. So
I think it might, for people who are used to Git, or if everyone's moving to Git, I just think it might make it easier for people to contribute patches if they didn't have to go through using the indirection, or maybe it's a minor detail.
Well, I mean, at the end of the day, there's always patches. Again, this is where that legal framework comes in. Patches have to be put up on Jira, and you have to check that little box, because that's kind of like the part of the legal defense that you have the right to contribute that patch. So we have to, at Apache and as a committer, part of your job is to know that you have the provenance to commit that patch, right? So, because that's kind of what all the legal framework underpinning the ASF, right? So you don't want to turn around and get sued because, or the ASF doesn't want to turn around and get sued because I committed something that you didn't have the right to do, right? So there's, all of that can be solved with Git and all of those various distributed SVN version controls, but there's still this part of it that we have to know that you have the right to do it. So
I do a lot of Lucene and Solr development on Git now anyway too, using those public mirrors, and I just kind of do my work there and create a patch when I'm ready and move it over to my SVN branch, and I'll commit from there. But because Git's branching is so nice, I tend to use it, and just at the end, whatever F format patch, whatever you do, pop out the patch and then commit it in SVN. So I mean, you can use Git if that's what you like, and it's really easy to make a patch off it.
So I think aside from local search and the stuff like a lot of the great work you're doing for Solr Cloud and stuff like that, one big thing that comes up a lot and is really popular right now is personalization in search. And it's a topic that's particularly difficult, I think, because oftentimes it's not something you can incorporate at index time, right? It's simply unfeasible to take millions of users' data and preferences and incorporate it into your index. And so I was wondering, what are some features that are coming up, or what thoughts do you have about the future of Lucene and being able to personalize search?
that's a good one. I think I've seen, one thing I think that is pretty effective here is function queries. Function queries allow you to both use things that are in the index, as well as, they can access other value sources. So you can use them to hook in and be part of the relevance score, right? So you pass in your user ID, the function query would have, some connection with whatever your user profile information is that you want to get, and then you incorporate it in there. I've also done work and just kind of prototyping around using like some of the features in Mahout for like collaborative filtering and clustering classification. So those tools often while not part of Lucene and Solr, fit very well into a search environment, so you can use them essentially as queries come in, look at their user profile, look at what other people have done who have similar user profiles, and then adjust your rankings using like the function query or sorting capabilities such that you then can spit out personalized results. But that's, everybody does those things differently, so those are kind of the tools I think that help enable that. So you might want to check out Mahout as well as function queries. Anybody else have?
Yeah, if I may add something. I'm going to talk about the clickstream processing later on today. And one of the applications of clickstream processing is personalized ranking. And that's where you build, well, I don't want to deliver my talk right now, but anyway, there are ways to do it, to solve it on the query side. If you put the right stuff in the index, then you can solve most of these personalized ranking scenarios on the query side.
Yeah, and I think too, it's not totally, a lot of people don't do, it's not per individual, but it's per groups of individuals, like people who fit similar profiles. So it's not completely personalized, but anybody else?
The question was if doc values, I was talking about yesterday, is important or interesting for that kind of thing. It's definitely interesting when you have data which is frequently changing. You don't want to re-index the entire index. Once doc values are updatable, that's definitely something that can help you. Yes.
And there also in Solr there is a function called the external value source, which points to a file that maps doc IDs to floats, so that can be used to, you probably could take something similar to that and essentially have a user to float kind of value source as well and use that as part of function queries. So there are tools available to do these kind of things. And of course, at the real low level, you could hook in at the collector level and do things down there, I suppose. Maybe not recommended, but
Robert, do you want to say something about flexible scoring? That might be helpful there too. Be more flexible with the scoring algorithm.
Yeah, there's in case you're not aware, there's actually a Google Summer of Code project right now going on where the goal is to make Lucene scoring more flexible. For example, you would be able to use a different paradigm other than vector space to do your scoring, and it's looking pretty good. So for example, it may be in the future that if you are using column stride fields, then your scoring algorithm could just pull those instead of pulling norms like it does now. And so you might have some more flexibility depending on how you want to implement it and how fast it needs to be, but there is some work going on there.
I was just curious if you could comment on some of the quote-unquote real-time, near real-time indexing and search features. I've seen a lot of really exciting things with the column stride fields and concurrent writes and all that. I saw the talk yesterday on Yammer, and they're using Zoe, and I don't know a lot about Zoe, but I'm just kind of curious if you could comment on that space, and is there any desire to put any kind of the real-time indexing features beyond what the talks have been about, or just comment in that direction in general?
Yeah, so what I said earlier, we do a lot of queries at Twitter using Lucene. It's actually not an unmodified Lucene, it's a trunk version from like 2 months ago with a lot of stuff that we build on top for real-time search, and we want to contribute all that back. We have already made an important step. Simon has talked yesterday about the document write up per thread patch, which was a really big refactoring of the indexing pipeline. And there were 2 reasons why we did that. One was it's a big indexing performance improvement. The other one is it's just preparing Lucene to do all the real-time stuff. Now that's in trunk, so the next steps are really to develop the next patches that get all the good real-time stuff back into Lucene. And it will subsume the near real-time feature, which has a lot of drawbacks right now if you use it, because every time, for example, you open an index reader, what Lucene does, it actually flushes all its data structures to the disk, right? And that's pretty inflexible, and the latency is not great. And as an example, at Twitter, for every of those 1 billion queries per day that we do, we open an index reader. So we open 20,000 index readers per second, basically. And so that's much more flexible and doesn't have all the drawbacks. And yeah, so it's not going to be like in the next month, but I think it's going to take half a year or a year until all that stuff is back, because it has a lot of different parts to it, but I think we have a good roadmap, and yeah, we definitely work on it.
Yeah, and you can do a pretty good job with the document writer per thread and what's going on now. I mean, we're more near real time than it was before, and a lot of that stuff we're trying to work into Solr now too, so should show up there before too long too.
And I think too, Michael has at least 2 talks that I've seen where if you're really interested in the low-level details from a computer science perspective and stuff like that, he gave one last year at our Boston conference, and then one in Berlin as well, at Berlin Buzzwords. So maybe just Google Michael Bush in real time and you'll find his talks on those. Who won the pool for that question? I think that was one of the bets we had as to who would ask the near real-time question. No, but yeah, I mean, it's been interesting because Lucene has been an incremental update model ever since the beginning. I mean, I think Doug had a lot of vision around that even way back in 1997, 1996. Back then, a lot of search vendors, you had to re-index your whole entire corpus anytime you wanted to even update a single document. So, whereas Lucene's always had this incremental model, and I think what you basically are seeing is that as Lucene matures and as we have these bigger needs, there's just how fast can we make that incremental model go? And I mean, it's still, even to this day, fits with that fairly similarly with the original model, right? So it's pretty exciting times.
So how is, can you talk at all about how eDismax is new or different from the Dismax we know and love?
Well, there's a number of ways. One is just, it really tries to be a superset of Dismax. For those who don't know, it's really a query parser designed to directly handle user input and never throw any exceptions. And it also does things like it separates what fields you query from the query itself. So the user may type in, just a query term, and then other request parameters have, say, what fields you should search over and what weights should be given to those fields. So eDismax cleans up some of the bugs that Dismax had. Dismax wasn't supposed to throw any exceptions, but you could pretty easily get it to throw an exception with just like a bare plus or a minus or a single quote, some things like that, I think. It also supports full Lucene syntax. So basically it tries to do that in a 2-phase approach. It tries to first parse it with the Lucene query parser. It's a multi-field parser still at that stage. And if that fails for some reason, it goes through and tries to escape a lot of the syntax that could have caused the exception. It also supports fielded queries even when it's doing all that escaping, so you don't lose the fielded queries.
Why do we have 2 classes? Why do we have 2 classes?
Because it was really just, it was originally developed in Lucid, and then Lucid contributed it back. And so rather than try to change the existing Dismax, we're really trying to bring eDismax up to speed. Eventually, when eDismax is a proper superset, and that involves nailing some features down that you might not want exposed to users, you may not want them the ability to query every field. Once we get those things nailed down and we can make it really look like Dismax, I think eDismax will replace Dismax and we'll just have one. So there's a couple other little features in there, like it handles pure negative queries that are embedded deep within the query structure. It also enables a better proximity boosting. Proximity boosting meaning, if the user types in multiple terms, basically you want documents where those terms appear closer together to score higher. So Dismax threw all those into a single sloppy phrase query. The problem there is if you're just missing one of those terms, then the sloppy phrase query doesn't match and you get no boost at all. And so we have enabled more options like doing term bigrams, just pairs of words, to put those into phrase queries or sloppy phrase queries. And the feedback we've gotten is that does actually enhance relevance a lot.
I'm forgetting the exact name, but I think it's filter query from external source. I think I probably asked about this the last time, but so I've got a database that's got the end result of my database query is a bunch of IDs, and I want some efficient way to.
You're looking directly at me. I can sense that.
Well, you remember probably the
Solr 1715?
Yes, that's what I couldn't remember. I was just wondering if there was
I believe
any,
it's 1750.
progress on that or any plans.
Yeah, so what Tom's talking about is oftentimes you want to have like this almost, I won't call it quite late binding injection, but you have an external source that is going to provide the doc IDs that you want to restrict your search down to. So the patch is called, or it's not a patch, it's not a patch yet. The issue is called externally generated filters, the idea being that you could, you have some other source like a database or some cache where you very quickly go there and get your list of doc IDs and create a bit set, and then you can inject that in to Solr or into your Lucene application. I think maybe there's been a little bit of work on some of the underpinnings to make that easier to use with the other filter stuff that you were working on.
I don't know. I mean, in general, I think the QParser framework is the right place to plug that in, since in Solr, filters are just queries. And so that feels like the right place. I mean, that's where we plugged in for spatial, the filters there too, the spatial filters. They're just like custom, they're, well, not custom, they're Solr now, so, but they're QParsers essentially. So there's probably some things we could do to make that easier, make some sort of base class or something that you could, inherit from to make that a lot easier.
I mean, and I think too, the other part is the base class hopefully would help enforce that what you're doing is going to perform, right? I mean, because that's the big issue. If you got to manage database connections and all that, you probably need some caching layer. So maybe there are some things that we could do to help there. But I mean, other than that, actually, I mean, the underpinnings are, like Yannick said, are pretty straightforward. You can just set the filter. Once you have that thing that generates the filter, you can just set it on the response builder. So it shouldn't be too hard to do.
I understand document level authorization, but I was wondering if there is a field level authorization. So in my instance, I have documents, and within the document I have some fields that have financial information, and I want to hide that to certain groups of users. Is there an elegant solution to that?
So you have per field security. Essentially, this field can be, depending on your role, you can see a specific field, right, or not. Mm-hmm. Right? Is there any solutions for that?
You have an application in front of the database, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, because essentially document level security is essentially with the early binding model is you put a token on to say whether that document is available. I mean, you could do similar things on per field. Other times I've seen people, what they do is they actually have, essentially what it works out to be is multiple documents, each one with the permission that you have for that field. So depending if that's too big of a multiplier, that might not be feasible, but I've seen that successful in some cases, where essentially for every security level you have, if you only have a few security levels, then you could, essentially have multiple documents, as copies. I don't know of any others. I've actually seen even a harder problem than that is that sometimes people have specific permission just to see certain words within a field. I don't know, Michael, did you work on that one at all, or no? Didn't you have some where you have like, if sometimes you have redacted information? I mean, you sometimes see this in the e-discovery space or the legal space, right? Like only certain people can see certain parts of certain words in the document or certain paragraphs. So you can maybe do something with span queries or position-based queries there, but I'm just, making things up at this point. But yeah, I don't think there's anything like native out of the box that would provide, other than you could probably get creative with, kind of along the side fields. So, okay. Well, with that, thank you everybody for coming, and thanks for the great questions.